graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves, take it to the top one time non-stop.
Hello, Jazli, and welcome to PhD Hard Talk. Thank you so much for your time today. Could you please introduce yourself and your research?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jazli. I'm a PhD student from Malaysia. I am currently in the final stages of my PhD. I have already submitted my thesis for examination. Currently waiting for my final step, the final hurdle, the actual PhD defense. Yeah. My research, it's related to periodontitis, which is inflammation of the gums.
Of course.
And also rheumatoid arthritis, which is inflammation of joints. Yeah. I'm doing my study in the Faculty of Dentistry, University of Malaya. And the approach that we are taking to the research is that periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, though they appear to be two distinct diseases, one in the oral cavity and one more is in the joints, they are actually quite interrelated. And there have been many studies in the past which studied how these two diseases are related from various aspects. And so what my project and my supervisors, our larger research group, what we are studying in general is basically studying more molecular ways of how the two diseases are related. So for me, the approach that I took was a microbial approach. So while bacteria have been commonly linked to both periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, I'm studying the viral component. So I'm studying on bacteriophages and how they relate to both periodontitis and rheumatoid arthritis, and also throwing in a few other components such as calcium, zinc, and also a few immune response mechanisms like cytokine expression.
Wow. I want to know
that sounds like a bit of a handful. Yeah.
It sounds really exciting because I hate going to the dentist, just to throw it out there. It's never good news for me. It's like upper 6, lower 7, left upper 6. It's like, oh my gosh, how much money is it going to cost me? So to hear that, it's like, okay, maybe I should pay attention. So in terms of your research then, how does it benefit the normal person like me, who's not in your field? How is it going to benefit the wider community, people who may suffer from arthritis or who've never been to the dentist? Now is your time to sell what you do. How does it help?
Well, for starters, I'm not actually a dentist. I'm working on the science behind it. But my supervisor and the other members of my research group, they are dentists. So I'm like the odd one out. So actually, from my point of view, because I study it from the molecular perspective. So if you ask me, it's more of a fundamental research project where we further understand how the two conditions are interrelated. But from a clinical perspective, because both conditions are, after all, clinical diseases. So from a clinical perspective, I believe that the better we understand how the two conditions are interrelated, the better treatment strategies can be planned for the patients. So the research may not necessarily benefit the patient directly, but by improving our clinical understanding of how the two conditions are related, that can then help the dentists better plan treatment strategies and treatment modalities for patients, because there have been studies which show that because the two conditions are related, that by treating one, it's possible to also help alleviate the symptoms of the other. And it's also been shown that, for example, if someone goes to a rheumatology clinic under suspicion of having rheumatoid arthritis, they get checked, and it's possible that since they are confirmed to have rheumatoid arthritis, they could also very highly have periodontitis as well, just that they don't know. So by further establishing the links between the two, if someone is to say in early stages of rheumatoid arthritis, a doctor could potentially suggest to them to go to the dentist and check if you also have periodontitis. Because if it's caught early, they can prevent it from becoming more severe.
Oh.
So yeah, so the treatments are usually the best way to explain how the research is beneficial to everybody else.
Amazing. So what did you study then for your master's?
My master's was completely different actually. So for my master's, I studied papaya leaf. Actually, no, not the leaf, the papaya fruit. The,
I love papaya.
Oh, you do?
Gosh,
Yeah.
it's so good. I love it.
So in our part of the world,
Yeah.
dengue is quite prevalent.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the most common, I guess you can say traditional remedies is for people to drink juice extracted from papaya leaf.
Oh.
Yeah, so for my master's, we took a different approach and we studied the young papaya. So the papaya that's still green, not ready to be eaten. Yeah. So I extracted juice from the from the unripe papaya. Inserted some of the juice into cell cultures to see what would happen to the cells. And so basically we found that because the reason why papaya leaf is often prescribed is because one of the symptoms of dengue is that the patients usually have low platelet counts in the blood.
Okay.
And drinking the papaya leaf juice actually helps to boost the platelet count. And so what we did for my master's was to study if the unripe papaya had the same effect. And although we didn't go all the way and measure the actual platelet counts because we did a in vitro study in cell cultures, what we did find was that by incorporating the papaya juice into the cell cultures, it did stimulate the cells down that path towards platelet production. So two completely different projects for my master's and for my PhD.
I'm thinking you were wasting papayas, but that's just my opinion, because when they're green before they get ripe. But I'm just trying to think. So when you moved from your master's to get to your PhD, because there's someone at home who's thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could move from one point of research that's so far from one and literally go over there and still be amazing. So could you take us through that journey, moving from studying plants to per se, well, not person, but disease, and looking at similarities? How did that journey start and what intrigued you?
Well, if you want to talk about how it started, I guess we're going to talk about my degree. Because my degree is the reason why I'm allowed to, or not the reason why I'm allowed, I would say is the reason why I'm able to do one project for my master's and a completely different project for my PhD. It's because for my degree, I took a degree in biomedical science.
Okay.
So biomedical science, basically it's a very wide field of study where we study everything from cell biology, molecular biology, immunology, anatomy, biochemistry, the whole 9 yards. So biomedical science is not very specific.
Okay.
It's quite broad in nature. So because it's quite broad in nature, it's like instead of being a master of, what's the saying? Jack of all trades, master of none, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so as a degree holder in the field, I learned a little bit about various more specific fields. And that gave me the opportunity to choose from a wider array of research projects for my master's. And it's also why I'm able to go into a PhD project completely unrelated to my master's, because I already have some of that background from my degree.
Okay, so advising somebody who's thinking of doing a degree at this moment in time, and they want that flexibility, the flexibility that you've just mentioned, what grades would they need to get from their A-levels? I'm not sure what you call A-levels there. Do they need AAA or BBB? How does it work?
In Malaysia, we do have A-levels, but we also have matriculation.
Okay.
I'm not sure how it translates to the UK, but
what is matriculation?
Yeah. So it's pre-U. So
Okay.
for example, we go into the pre-U, we take a course. For example, my pre-U was 1.5 years.
Okay.
And so the pre-U is basically the pre-course to your degree. So whatever you study in your pre-U, it will lead to your degree in university, the 4-year course.
Okay.
So for my pre-U, I did biological science for 1.5 years. And then those who took that pre-U course, biological science, when they went into uni, they had the choice of biomedical science, which is what I did, or you could choose biotechnology, which is what some of my other friends did.
Okay.
But yeah, so in Malaysia, we do have A levels, mostly private unis, private colleges. But when it comes to grades and requirements, I'm not particularly sure. I think possibly different universities have different requirements, but I would say that safe to assume anything above a CGPA of 3.0 maybe might be sufficient, depending on where you're applying to.
Okay, no, thank you very much for sharing. I'm sure there's someone at home who's thinking, okay, that sounds really exciting. I like the fact that there's flexibility because for some of the courses, you feel like there is no flexibility. It's only later on that you realize I can collaborate and work, you know, with someone from a different department, but not necessarily what I do. If that makes sense. So advice then, would you say it is better to get a scholarship or to self-fund? What are your thoughts?
Considering the high cost of education at the moment, I think it's the same around the world, no matter where you are. It would probably be advisable to get a scholarship.
Okay.
But because the scholarship, I think there's two things to a scholarship. One is that it helps fund your studies.
Okay.
And usually scholarships also will tie you down to an institute after you're finished with your studies. So basically it's like job security. So for example, for me, I am sponsored for my PhD. And after I'm done, I will be working here in this faculty as a lecturer. So I'm quite fortunate. I'm quite lucky to get the opportunity. So yeah, I think I have met people who are self-funded, but the problem with being self-funding is, of course, you need to have the funds in the first place.
Of course.
And secondly, when you're done, you have to then go out and look for work, which might not be that easy, especially in this climate that we're in now. So if scholarships are available, even maybe partial scholarships, I think I would suggest that's the better opportunity, the better route to take.
Okay, so you've just touched on partial scholarships. Some people may not know what they are. What is a partial scholarship? Just for the audience.
Yeah, so full scholarships, usually they pay for your tuition fees. And sometimes they also give you a monthly stipend, a monthly allowance. Some partial scholarships, like we have some students here also under partial scholarships. So they may also cover a portion of your fees, not everything. They may also give you a monthly stipend, but maybe not as much as a full scholarship. And sometimes these partial scholarships don't come with the added job security of a full scholarship.
Yeah. Okay, that's quite interesting. It feels as if you're touching on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you need the security. Sorry to bring a theory into our conversation. That it's better to know that you've got a job after than to spend all of your money in your education and not have a job, because that's going to stress you even more, essentially, in that sense. So thank you for your wise words. In terms of future then, you know, I know you've published. What's your advice for somebody that's thinking, I do want to publish, but I've been on Twitter and I've seen some of the comments. I mean, it is banter, whereby people say, you know, I've sent in my first one and it's been rejected, ha ha ha, the life of a PhD student, or, you know, review or two came through, I've been bashed, I'm wounded, you know, pray for me for the next one. What advice do you have for somebody that's reading that? Because we are all different and anxiety attacks us at different levels. For some people, it's just reading and they think, do you know what? I don't think I should do a PhD, or I shouldn't write anything. What advice do you have?
Well, I think if people who are active on Twitter, especially academic Twitter, because I've only been part of academic Twitter for like a few months, and I've seen a lot. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in academic Twitter.
I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry. I know I've seen a lot too. That's why I'm laughing. Sorry, forgive me.
It's very active, academic Twitter. Yeah. So I would say if you have seen the dark side, I guess you can say, of academic Twitter, like you said, people who send the papers in for publication but get rejected. Some people have papers published only after a year of revisions and feedback and back and forth with journals. I would say that if you've seen that, chances are you've also seen the bright side, because many people also share their successes on Twitter. Like just this past couple of days, I've seen a few people post the good news that they've had their first paper cited, or even before citation, their first papers have been published. And then actually recently, I also tweeted saying, asking academic Twitter, what are some of the best firsts that you experience in academia? And one of them is definitely getting your first author paper published, and also getting your first citation. Those are some of the things in academia that really make it feel worthwhile, I guess I would say, that first moment of breakthrough. So to people, I guess, who think that it's difficult to get published or to even be involved in academia, I would say that, yeah, it is quite difficult, especially nowadays with the predatory nature of journals, where we see almost every journal asks you to pay just to get your paper reviewed for submission. And some journals, even after you pay for the review, they reject it anyway. So it is quite difficult. It is quite hard. So I guess my advice would be, if you do want to go into academia, I think you need to make sure first and foremost that you actually do want it. And you're not doing it just because there's no other option out there. Like some people I know, they go into postgraduate studies because they can't find work. Some people think, oh, I'm tired of working. I want to go back to being a student. I want the flexibility of being a student. And so with those kind of mindsets, the moment you come across any obstacle, such as publication, you start questioning yourself again. And so I think personally for me, one of my driving factors of why I want to be in academia is that I actually want to do the research. I actually feel like I enjoy the writing process. I know it might sound a bit weird to some people, like enjoying the writing process, because some people find it a bit of a chore. But I mean, personally, I enjoy the process of doing the research, of having discussions with the research group, writing the paper, publishing the paper. Because sometimes after a few months, and I look back at some of my publications, and then I'm reading through it, and then I feel like I did quite a good job.
I love it.
Like patting myself on the back a little bit, but it's true.
As you should.
Yeah, because when you're writing the paper, you don't feel confident when you're writing it. You feel like, oh, what if this isn't good enough? What if my supervisor asks me to change this? Or what if I submit it to the journal and the journal rejects it? You're full of self-doubt when you're writing it. So when it is finally published and the ecstasy of the publication has passed on, and you wait a few months and you go back and you read your paper, you'll be like, how did I do this? So that kind of joy, I guess you can say, or a sense of satisfaction, that kind of thing is in itself its own reward. But I feel like only people who are in the field because they want to be in the field, those are the people who truly appreciate that kind of feeling.
No, I like that. Thank you for sharing that, because it's not necessarily out there what you've just said, but we do think about it in our heads, but we don't believe what we think sometimes. So it's nice to have that reassurance from your words to say, do you know what? It's a milestone in your study, and you need to appreciate it and do it for the right reasons. And I think when it comes to the right reasons, you know how, is it the cancel culture that we have now? That people so, people are quite afraid to say how they truly feel. But I believe in terms of us as researchers, we need to start being honest with ourselves and start sharing some hard truths to say, do you know what, are you here for the right reasons? I'm not saying everybody's there, in the dark Twitter world, crying and saying how crappy it is. But it's nice to hear that there's positive reinforcement. So thank you for sharing that. So in terms of somebody who's currently writing as well, and they've made a decision, they've said, you know what, as soon as I graduate, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to work. I want to go into industry. I want to experience that world. What advice do you have for them if they're in that thought process, since you're staying and they're going?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, just like any other industry, academia doesn't necessarily fit for everyone. Some people might start in academia, find that it doesn't really suit them, and they might want to leave. So I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. Some people might start in the industry and then they might get tired of that and they might want to go into academia. So it's like a two-way street. But either way, I think academia, I guess like any other industry, it fills you with experiences that are unique to the field. Like only people in academia will understand the memes that academic Twitter posts online. People outside the field might not necessarily, like you mentioned earlier about reviewer 2. I'm sure people who are not in academia will have no idea what we mean by reviewer 2. So I guess everybody's experiences, like you said earlier, also everybody's different. All our experiences are different. So if you tried academia, didn't really have a good experience with it, felt that maybe it's not for you, and you think that maybe you have better luck in the industry, I would say then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you. So now moving back to your research then, your methodology for your research. We can touch on that. I think it's a safe zone. So what methodology practice did you follow and why?
So for my bacteriophage analysis, bacteriophages are quite unique in the sense that they don't all have a unique genomic structure like bacteria. So bacteria, there's this thing called, I think it's 16S next genetic sequencing, something along those lines. I'm not really sure. NGS. Yeah. So basically what it means is you can run a genetic test on one sample and be fed back every single species in that sample. So for bacteria, that's possible, but for viruses, not so, because viruses have very distinct genomic sequences. They don't really have anything that's shared between them. So if you want to test for bacteriophages, usually you have to test specifically for one bacteriophage. So you need to know what you're looking for. So what I did for my study, I did something which I think maybe the whole world is familiar with at the moment, which is PCR. Which I'm sure many people will know from the COVID testing. So the reason why they use PCR is because COVID is a virus. And so PCR, in addition to being used for identification of bacteria, it can also be used for viruses. And so the way PCR works is basically, we know the genomic sequence of a particular species. So for example, in my case, I knew the genetic sequence of the bacteriophage that I'm studying. And so I did the PCR to identify this genetic sequence. And in addition to identifying it, I did a deeper PCR analysis, which was able to quantify the bacteriophage in my samples. So PCR usually, like for COVID, usually PCR, it detects whether or not your target gene is present in the sample. But the deeper form of PCR, which is called real-time PCR, that can be used to actually quantify your gene in the sample. And so what I did for my study was we took saliva samples and we also took plaque samples from the patients. and then we ran it through the PCR machine. And so I was able to identify, number one, if my bacteriophages of interest were actually present in the sample. And number two, which bacteriophages were present in higher amounts compared to the others. Yeah, so PCR is one thing that I use for the bacteriophage analysis. And for my other components, the analyses were quite, I guess in the field, they're quite basic, quite common. One of them is called ELISA.
Okay.
It stands for, it has a nice name, ELISA. It stands for Enzyme-Linked Immunosorbent Assay.
Oh, I've learned something new.
So ELISA is basically a method of detecting proteins.
Okay.
And so cytokines are a protein. So our body generates cytokines because cytokines are, you can think of them as molecular messengers. So one cell will produce a cytokine. The cytokine will then go to another cell and tell the cell what he needs to do.
Okay.
So it's like a postal system, messaging system. Yeah. So our body generates different cytokines in different situations. And so with periodontitis and with rheumatoid arthritis, both of them are chronic inflammatory conditions. And so in this case, we would expect pro-inflammatory cytokines to be produced in higher amounts because they lead to inflammation. And so what ELISA does is it detects how much of the cytokine is present in the sample.
Okay.
Yeah. So usually ELISAs are done similar to PCR. They are done one target at a time. So you do one ELISA for one cytokine. You do another ELISA for another cytokine. But that can be quite costly. And you might also need a larger amount of sample because you need to put your sample into each kit. So what I did was a still similar concept to ELISA, but a bit different. It's called the multiplex immunoassay. So basically what that is, same concept as ELISA, but you put one amount of sample into the well, into the plate, and instead of detecting one sample, instead of detecting one cytokine, it could detect all your cytokines.
Oh, that sounds so interesting.
Yeah, so it saves time. It's a bit more expensive than, say, for example, one ELISA kit. But so for me, my study encompassed 5 cytokines. So instead of buying 5 separate kits for 5 separate cytokines, I just purchased one multiplex kit to detect all 5 cytokines. So it's quite interesting, quite fun, yeah.
No, it sounds really interesting. I might change my research and move over to your side. So to round off, really, mental health in research. What are your thoughts on the current state? I mean, at the moment, worldwide, we're starting to not acknowledge, but receive that mental health is a disease and that we need to work together as a community to help ourselves to do better with our colleagues and with ourselves. You know, there's self-love books out there, you've seen on IG, you know, there's so much out there at the moment. What are your thoughts just looking at your academic journey? What advice do you have for somebody that may be or may not be, or maybe and not realizing, suffering from mental health challenges?
It's definitely like you said, how it seems like the awareness of mental health globally is rising at the moment, and especially in academia. I think possibly, like you said, in the past, many people were suffering from some form of mental health illness, for lack of a better word. But they just didn't know.
Yeah.
So now that it's becoming more apparent and people are more aware of it, I think the important thing, the first step is, like you said, awareness. So I think the onus is on people who are already aware, especially in academia. So those who have already graduated, those who are in the final years of their study, those who are aware of the potential toll that academia can have on people. I think it's important for them to try their best to make sure that the younger generation, those who are coming up through the ranks, I think it's important for the seniors to avoid the same vicious cycles which affected them in their early years, in their studies.
Yeah.
Because in academia, I think a lot of the mental health problems arise from unrealistic expectations from their supervisors, or maybe bullying nature in academia, unreasonable expectations to publish, you know, the kind of publish or perish mantra that's very famous in academia. So I think for people who are just getting into academia, it's important for them to, like I have a friend who is very aware of how they feel. And so every now and again, at the end of every year, they would look back through the year, see what they did, see what they didn't do, see how they felt. Yeah. It's like you know how we have those Spotify year in reviews or the Google year in search. So it's something like that, but more on a personal level.
Okay.
So I think it's important for everyone in academia. I mean, not just in academia, but in general. But since we are talking about academics, right? So I think it's important for people in academia to, like I said, be aware of their mental health. They might not necessarily see a problem, but the moment they feel that something is off, I think they need to address it. So like, address it before it gets too late.
No, thank you so much for that. You know, you've seen on Twitter as well. It's a thing. I'll call it a thing because it's become trending, and it becomes a thing when it's trending. But it is a disease that needs a cure. So hence why I went for a thing in terms of the trending element. It's not fashionable. It's, you know, this is a situation that needs all of our attention in so many ways because we're all different, to which we both agree. So the last question, right. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. Well, I'll say thank you first for coming on PhD Hard Talk. And I will ask the question, which is, you agreed to come on PhD Hard Talk. Why would you agree to come on PhD Hard Talk? What are the benefits that you see when it comes to the PhD Hard Talk brand, and for you to want to share your research on a global platform on YouTube?
Well, I thought it would be quite fun to speak, not just to you, but of course to your audience. Because I mean, like we said, academic Twitter is very active, and so I enjoy the interactions with everybody. Because the cool thing about academic Twitter, unlike say for example a personal Twitter where you only connect with friends and family, is that you don't really know everybody in academic Twitter, and yet you're all connected anyway.
Literally.
And so being able to share your experience and being able to learn about other people's experiences who are in the same boat as you, I find that quite interesting. Sometimes it can be quite fun.
Yes.
And yeah, the biggest thing I feel about academic Twitter is how supportive everyone is. I mean, like I said, we don't know the people in our network on academic Twitter. We've never met them personally. Chances are people see a tweet retweeted and they don't even follow that person, but they offer their support regardless.
Yeah.
So that kind of camaraderie, that kind of support that I see in academic Twitter is one of the reasons why I thought it would be quite fun to come onto PhD Hard Talk and share my experiences and try to further broaden the network. I thought it would be a good opportunity.
Thank you. No, I agree with you. I mean, I see some tweets whereby somebody's like, I passed, or I published my first paper, and it's like, I want to be there. I'm excited. I want to cheer you on. I want to be a cheerleader. So no, definitely, I agree. It's such an amazing platform, and I think it's PhD voice, postdoc voice. There's so many academic chatter, postgraduate or graduate. there's so many out there, and they keep us entertained. So thank you, whoever's running those platforms. You guys are amazing. So thank you so much. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And for chatting with me. And hopefully people at home have learned so much, because I feel I've learned and I've enjoyed our chat today. So thank you.
Me too. Yeah. Thank you.
Elevated, now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go.